I have a hate relationship with ants. They're evil. They're absolutely evil. Stay with me as I tell you about my journey with these little creatures that are out to get me. And I can guarantee they're probably out to get you too. It all began in the kitchen. You know what I mean. You've been there. When you get one little scouter ant comes marching in to investigate to see what's cooking. And then before you know it, there's two. And then you have a line of ants. And then your kitchen is overrun by ants. We've all been there one time or another. My brothers used to torture them. And they would have fun taking a black ant and putting it into a red ant colony and watching them fight. And then they'd take a red ant and putting it into a black ant colony and watching them fight. So they would have the battle of the ants, and it was a little weird, needless to say. And then one day, my mother came home with a box of donuts. Now, we rarely had sweets in the house, so this was really special. She brought home it looked like a giant box of donuts because I was only this tall. And I'm like, oh, donuts! And so she gave me a donut. I ran to my bedroom. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted some privacy. And I sat on my bed and started eating the donut. Well, if you know me, I've always been a sloppy eater. Even now, I get food all down my top. I even have a giant scar where I dropped a ravioli down my top and it burned me. But that's another story. So the next morning, I woke up and ants, you know those cute little ants from the kitchen? Well, they found me. They really found me in my bedroom. I woke up and I couldn't get up. Ants were covering all over the floor. For a little kid, it was like trying to get out of bed and stepping into lava. You remember the lava game. Hot lava. I was screaming, ants, ants! I don't remember how my mother rescued me, but somehow I got out and she took care of that. She was my hero, yeah. Until one day. One day, I was down by the creek playing. And yeah, that's what we did as kids. We played in the sand. We caught pollywogs, and it was a great adventure down by the creek in the middle of our little town. And I didn't realize it, but I was sitting on an ant hill. And before I knew it, those creepy crawlers were... I was covered with ants. And little kid, I felt like I was going to die. So I ran home, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. So my mother came out to rescue me again. Thank you, Mom. And so I didn't know what I thought she was going to do. She took out the garden hose. And to my memory, it was like my mother was overcome by the devil or something. She started spraying me down like a dog. And I'm going, no! As my mother spraying me down like a dog, and my mother's going, whoa, ho, 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 ho. That's how I remember it. It probably wasn't that way, but she did spray me down like a dog. I've shared that story before, and the reaction was, well, what do you think she was supposed to do? I don't know. So anyway, that was just the beginning. Did you see that? Did you see that? That was a carpenter ant. So later, much later, as an adult, I moved to Northern California. And we had carpenter ants, and as you can guess by the name, they like to chew up wood. So I was with my children one morning eating breakfast, some crunchy cereal. Crunch, 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 crunch. And then I heard in the wall, crunch, 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 crunch. Am I hearing things? I was a little nutty at that time. I was a little crazy, so I wasn't sure. And then, so, crunch, 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 crunch. And then I hear crunch, 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 crunch. There are ants in the wall eating their breakfast with me. My husband's like, no, there's no ants in the wall, because he thought I was crazy, which I'm not. Every morning, crunch, 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 crunch. It was driving me bananas. And I said, no, there's ants in the wall. Well, he wouldn't do anything. And I couldn't find them because they were in the wall. So I called an exterminator. And yes, indeed, there were ants in the wall. And he sprayed whatever goo he had to get rid of them. And he killed the ants in the wall. They were driving me berserko. Very berserko. And so it was about a year or two later. I had a job inspecting telephone poles for a cable TV company and making sure that the poles were properly grounded and the lines were properly installed and all that kind of stuff. And I was out in the street in this neighborhood inspecting the pole, again, not realizing I was on an anthill. And I guess it was carpenter ants. I don't know. Or maybe just those little ants that eat you. And so I started feeling, ooh, 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 ooh. And I looked down and do once again. It was a nightmare from my childhood. The ants started marching up my body in the middle of the road. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So I started ripping off my clothes in the middle of the street down to my underwear. I'm so glad I wore a bra that day because I usually don't wear one. And I'm like, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? So I ran to the end of the street because it looked like someone was home. And I'm like, knock, 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 help me, help me, help me. I was attacked by ants. Help me, help me, help me. Ah! And I still had ants all over my body, even though I was in my underwear. And so this very nice elderly woman opened the door and she said, oh, yes, darling, come in. Take a shower. I'm like, okay. So I got in her shower. I didn't know who this person was. And I showered off and I washed all the ants off my body and I thanked her. And I felt a little bad because she had ants all over her bathtub. And I couldn't clean it up. I almost took a little disability for that, but my boss wouldn't take me seriously. Oh, you got a few ant bites. Ha, 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 ha. So I went back to my work truck. I put my clothes back on. Walking around the neighborhood in my underwear. Luckily, there wasn't anyone else around. They're out to get me, I swear. These ants are out to get me. When I moved to the south, they have fire ants, and they build these little mountains. Actually, the biggest one I saw was like this tall. I stayed away from it. Fire ants will strip the meat off a chicken bone, just clean. They're crazy, crazy little creatures. I hope you enjoyed my saga about ants. I know that many of you can relate with it. I really appreciate you coming by. I hope to see you next time. This is Ma Shelley, the pond plant girl, not the ant girl. You keep on being you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.